Hello guys, welcome back. In this Jetpack Compose tutorial, we'll learn about animations API and how to use them properly. We'll focus on animated visibility and animate as a state and how to customize them to reflect your app needs. Now let's get started. So we're going to create here a new file. So this we're going to call it home. And inside here, let's create here a new composable and we're going to call this main screen. Now, this idea we have to create a state so that we can animate. So we're going to use this state in order to animate, and we are going to call this visible. So we are going to create here a column so that we can structure our code. And inside here, we are going to create an if statement. So if this is going to be visible, then we want to add a text inside here. And now let's create here a button so that we can use to toggle between animations. So inside this on click here, we want to change the state. So we are going to negate the value here. And inside here, we can pass in a text, and this text is going to be animate. Also, we can try to pass in here modify in order to align this to the end. So now we have created here. Let's call this main screen inside here our main activity. So we are going to call this main screen. Now let's try here, run our application and see how it's going to behave. Now let's press this button here. So in order to animate that visibility changes, we have to use a composable functions, and in Jetpack Compose is really simple. It's just replacing this if statement with the animated visibility. And as you can see here, we're getting here an error, and we have to add this experiment API. So we have to reference these classes of the animation APIs, and they can be added new features or removed entirely. So this is just a word of caution. So right now, let's try run our application and see if there is changes. Now let's press this animate button. As you can see now, it's just coming from the top and sliding down. And this is the power of Jetpack Compose. So we can try to customize this in our preference. So let's do this right now. So in order to customize that animation visibility, so there are a bunch of parameters which this animated visibility provides. So as you can see here, we have this inter, and it's a inter transaction and exit transaction. And this API provides several different inter and exit transactions which are built in, and you can just try to use them. So let's navigate here and create the inter transaction. So inside here, there are different, if you go to the Google documentation, you can see these transactions. So we can have the slide in, for example, here we can have the fade. We have the fade in. And also we can specify here the exit with the fade out. As you can see here, it's just really simple to customize, and you can try here to add other transactions. For example, here we can add the expand horizontally. And also here we can add the shrink horizontally. Now, if we try to run our application, you can see the changes inside our view. Now let's press this animate button here and see. As you can see now, it's sliding from this top left corner. And if we press this, it slides out from this and it fades out. Now, as you have seen here, we can really customize this easily, and we can further customize this also. As you can see here, there are different parameters which we can pass inside here. As you can see, you have the initial float value, which you want to start to fade out or fade in. And we have another variable, which is called the animation spec. And we're going to talk this in more details later in this video. So let's add here the animation spec. So for example, here we can provide we can use a screen. So we are going to speak about this screen later in this video. As you can see here, we can provide the duration of this animation. So for example, we can provide here for 1 second. And also if you want to delay this this animation, for example, here we can provide just like 50 millisecond. And if we try to rerun our application, you can see. Now let's press this animate here. And as you can see that the fade in is just delayed for a certain amount of time. Now, this was all about animating visibilities. So what if we wanted to animate the changes in colors or changes in size of an object and animating the content changes? So there are other composables which are built in by these APIs. You can try and use them. So right now, let's try and use the animate as a state composables, which are really just good in order to animate. So we are going to create here another object. And this composable is going to be called my object. As you can see inside here, we are just using a surface, and this surface has the size, the padding, and the absolute offset value. And the offset value is going to offset the Y value. So we want to create a movement between one point to another point. So we are going to use this to animate the offset. So in order to animate this, we are going to remove this animated visibility because we are not going to use it anymore. So now, in order to do that, we have to create a state. So inside here, we are going to create an enum class, which is going to hold up our state. And we are going to call this. So we have here a start state and a state. So we are going to use this as our state. And inside here now, we can try and remove this because we are going to use that the box state. And we can try to change this box state inside here. So we are going just to, we're going to use a when statement. So in this box state, so now basically here we are just swapping these values. So if it isn't start, we want to change the state to end. And if it's end, we change the state to start. So now we are done with this pattern inside here. Now we can try to animate these boxes. So we can provide here the box. So we can use this my object inside here. Now we want to create a state that we can use to offset these values. So inside here now we can create another variable. So this is going to be let's just create outside here. So we want to create the offset, and it's just going to be the value of the peak. So now we want to use the animate as float. We want to use this animate dp as a state, and we want to provide the target value. So now we are going to use the if statements, and if this box is going to be so if this one is going to be at the start, we want to return a 5 dp offset. Else we are going to return here a 300 dp offset. So let's pass in here our target value, and then we are going to pass in the offset value. Now let's try and rerun our application C. So now we want to move this box from this position to this position, and let's try to animate this. Now, as you can see, the box is moving toward these two positions, the start and finish the position. So we can try to customize this and provide ease in and other ways. So let's start with the spring. Now, in order to change that default animation which we have seen, we can try to customize this by using the animation specification. As any of these animation specification stores the animation, including the data type. So, for example, here we can provide that animation specification, and inside here now we can pass in. Now we are going to start with the spring. Let's see here. This is spring. So inside this string function, as you can see here, we have the damping ratio. Also, we have the stiffness. So the damping ratio, this is the amount of oscillation, and this is just the float from 0 to 1. So you can try to provide your value, or you can use the built-in. Also, we have the stiffness. This defines the time or the amount of time which the animation is going to run. Also, we have the visibility threshold. So the time when the animation is going to be stopped. Now let's try here and pass in now the damping ratio. And the damping ratio here, we can use here the high bounce, screw it high. And also you can provide here, for example, stiffness. And this is the amount of time. So for example, here we can use this medium. Or we can go with this high. So it's going to take this time and it's going to bounce up. And you can pass in the visibility threshold, but you're going to leave it. So let's try and rerun our application. Also, let's change this offset. Let's change this offset here of this object. And we are going to change this from, not from Y, we are going to change this from X value. Let's try and rerun our application and see. So right now we have changed the offset position. We are going from this point to this point. So we are going from the X axis and not the Y axis. So let's try and animate here. Now, as you can see here, it is just bouncing around and we have used the high bouncing option. However, this animation gives us a little room of control on how we are going to animate this. So there are other these functions which you can use. And the next one, which is twin, let's see how we are going to use this twin. So let's use the twin animation, which is going to give us a room for control of our animation. So twin function here provides the duration, the delay mills, and easing curve. So you can see here the duration of the animation specification and also the amount of time in will start the animation which before starting, and also the easing curve that interpret between start and end state. So we can provide here, for example, the duration mills. And here we can specify, for example, 1000. So we are going to 1000 millisecond, which is equivalent to 1 second. Also can provide here the delay mills. So we are going to delay this by just 50 milliseconds. And also we can provide the easing curve. Now, here easing, there are a bunch of built-in easing. As you can see, we have here the linear easing. And also we have, for example, here, let's pass in the linear out slow easing in. So let's try and rerun this up and see. Now let's press here, animate. Now, as you can see here, it is starting fast and then here the meter slowing down, then going fast also. So this one is going to interpolate inside the curve, and you can provide your own custom animations here. For example, here, this linear easing, if you press Ctrl Q, you can see that is using the cubic Bezier easing in, which you can use to provide yourself. So for example, here we can use this. And now let's rerun. So now let's press here, animate. Now, as you can see here, it is going slowly, then going really fast. So this was just a simple way which you can use the twin animation. Let's try also another animation, which is the keyframe animation. So now let's use the keyframe animation function. So we can try to change this, and we have been using this DP every time. So we want to change the data type. And for example, here we can use a float. So we can use the animate float as a stage. So we are going to change also the data type here, and this we are going to specify here to be. And we're going to change this because we want to increase the size of the object. So we are going to call this a scale in our point here, and we're getting here an error because we are returning a DP. So for example, here we want this to be 1F at this point, and when it is being in a finished state, we want this to be, for example, here 10 times the actual size. And now we can change this my object here, and because we don't need this anymore, so inside this my object here, we can set the offset value to a default value of 0D. And also we can add here a new value which is called the scale. this scale is going to take up the spot. And now inside this modifier here, we can add a scale function, and we can provide that scale that we. Now, if we come inside here, this is my object, and we can try now to scale. Now, we want to use here keyframe animation, so we are going to use this. So inside this keyframe animation, we have this scope here, and it has a data type of float. And inside here, we have the power of using the tree, but with more customization option. So for example, here we can use the duration. We can provide here the duration. For example, we want our animation to last. For example, here we want to use the 1000 milliseconds. And also we have the power of adding here the keyframe. So for example, at a certain point, we want this to be in a certain position. So for example, here we will use 5K. Then we can use this at. And this at, as you can see here, it adds a keyframe so that animation value will be this at the timestamp which I've specified here. For example, here we want this to be 5. And we can try to add is in. For example, here we can use with, and this with adds an is in for the interval stated. So for example, here we have provided this interval here, and we want to is in. So we can provide here, for example, at this is in, we can use the fast out, slow in. And also we have the power of adding the delay, delayed mirrors. For example, here we can use this 50 milliseconds so that we can delay the animation to get started. And right now we can try to rebuild our project and see. Now let's scale things out. And you can see here now it's scaling. So guys, let's leave it here. And as you have seen, we've been animating a certain value at one point. But you can try to animate two values. For example, if you want to scale and change the color simultaneously. And that is another API, which is called the Transition API. And there are so much more which we have not covered in the video. So if you want more videos about this, just comment down below and I'll make a next video. So for now, let's leave it here. See you in the next video.